Hi, I'm Rich Heller, and welcome to Rich in Relationship. And today we're going to be interviewing Karen Bigman, who is the founder of the Divorcierge. Karen is an amazing divorce coach. She partners with individuals going through divorce, consulting with them on how to navigate the emotional, financial, and logistical issues. She, in addition to coaching people, does divorce planning and helps people to find the right team of professionals, which makes her pretty unique in this field. She's a graduate of Columbia with an MBA and actually has her own personal experience of divorce, at which I'm sure she'll share all this good stuff with us. How are you today, Karen?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I ran out of air. There's too many credentials.
Oh. It's always hard to listen to your own credentials, right?
Yeah. So tell us, how did you get inspired to get into this work?
I actually am a little different than many of my peers in that I was inspired by a friend who was navigating divorce herself. I ran into her in the bank. She was about to, she'd finalized her divorce. Had been a long marriage. And although she was a very capable, in fact, woman, she had her own business. When it came to dealing with the administrative stuff that had to do with banking, anything in her house, she was at a loss at this point. I ended up working with her just as a friend, and from that I realized that if someone like her could have so much difficulty, then there must be other people, and the idea of this concierge service for divorce was born. And I kind of got things going. I figured out my name, hung my shingle, started taking some coach training, and then of course went through my own divorce, at which point I realized that starting a business and going through a divorce at the same time are probably not the wisest things to do. So we did, I had been married for 24 years when we separated, and we had a fairly amicable mediated divorce. And once I sort of got through that, I started in earnest really getting the business off the ground.
Got it. So you had the personal experience, plus you had helped a friend, and you thought, oh, I'm good at this. And
Yes.
how did the concept of a concierge service for people divorcing come to the service, which I think is brilliant, by the way.
Thank you.
Not that I know anything.
Well, what you do know, I guess, that we all realize after the fact, that many people don't know because they've never been through it, is that there's not only the emotional component of divorce, but there are many moving parts that are all happening at the same time. And you're an emotional wreck, and yet you have to fill out a statement of net worth. You got to collect all these bazillions of documents. You may never have logged on to your bank account. You have to learn how to do that. So I definitely have a lot of time spent, particularly with stay-at-home moms who have been taking care of the children and then sort of let the finances roll to their husbands, and now they have to face that. But beyond just the finances, there's figuring out how you're going to manage your children from two households, how you're going to make the transitions, what does it mean, how do you tell people, how do you have the conversations, just on to everything you need to do once the divorce is final, and then things that you probably have no idea about, like quadros and all these like terms that your lawyer may be using and you're too embarrassed to ask the question. What does that mean? So that's kind of what I do, is really break it down to help people feel that they're in a safe space to ask any question they want, and just say, I know my lawyer's telling me I need this, or I have a meeting tomorrow and I don't know what it means. To let people know, sort of take out the mystery so that they can be more focused and really negotiate a better deal for themselves.
So you help them to find the right people, and just as important, I think, it sounds like you help them understand the terminology. And divorce, like any area that has specialization, has its own language. Yes. That each professional uses. Actually, I've noticed, that attorneys have their terminology, financial planners have their terminology, therapists have their terminology, and so you make sure that everybody understands what's being said.
Exactly.
So that they can choose from a place of real understanding. And it sounds like you really get in their corner also. I mean, we all know that, I've done some divorce coaching, and so I know that, and I've been divorced, and I've been a child in divorce, so I know that divorce can be really, really stressful. I know my personal experience was that my friends, many of my friends were married, and even though they wanted to be supportive of me, they didn't really understand what I was going through, nor could they on some level. In fact, I think some people, they acted like maybe they would catch it from me. So, how do you support people in terms of feeling connected in the divorce process?
Yeah, and I think that's a particular issue for the younger moms that are not, and I do work with men as well, but for younger couples, particularly because they have nobody really to talk to. I had one client that was petrified about how the moms at school were going to react when they found out, and what would she say? And basically, she just needed permission to say that I don't want to talk about it, and that's okay. So sometimes it's just giving them the language and being that person when there's nobody really to talk to. I think like some of the mistakes that I made, although I'm of the what they call, and I hate to say it because I want to call it the platinum blonde divorce, but the gray divorce generation. I also had no one to talk to. Interestingly, my community was just not, I wasn't close with anybody local. And the friend who had navigated it ahead of me, that was my inspiration for my business as a working mom and now a single working mom. So she had her own stuff to deal with. But I think that it's kind of, you go into, whether it's mediation, which it was in my case, and particularly in a high conflict situation, and you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to expect. And then you're afraid to speak up because you're afraid if you say something, particularly if you're the non-moneyed spouse, that the deal will just fall apart and you'll be left with nothing. And it's a real fear for some people, but in most cases, it's that like disaster mentality that you go through. So I really try to be that, voice of reason, the sounding board that says, he's not going to lock you and the children out of the house and put you on the street. And you are a capable person that can go back to work, and we'll figure out a path for you. And so the more planful you are, the more you have the steps in place so that you know what they could be, the less stress you should have.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you work with people to help them you use the term planful. What I hear when you say that is to think about the future and how they can navigate towards a future they might want, even though divorce is not anything that anyone would want necessarily. It does have an ending point, and there is a future place to get to it. And I hear that you help people to be careful about what they say and how they act so that they can get there. And what it makes me wonder as I'm listening to you is how does the work you do different from what, let's say, a therapist might do?
That's a great question. And I think I often work hand in hand with therapists. So therapists definitely help with obviously serious, any kind of emotional trauma, your history, figuring out how you ended up in this relationship. And if I've had clients who've had PTSD from severe emotional abuse. I've had clients that just get like so depressed beyond just the sadness, but really can't get out of bed. So there's definitely, and I think we work very well together. In general, coaching, divorce coaching, life coaching is very forward thinking and trying to get you from here to there. I kind of use the coaching tools as vehicles to help get the tactical stuff done. So I work in, I don't exclusively coach, but I feel like those tools are invaluable for clients that are really having a hard time, but it's more to propel them forward and getting through the actual tactical process. And then when it comes to the other side, maybe they'll do visioning or things that will help, if they want to go back to work or dating or whatever it may be.
I got it. So therapists are going to always help with addictions, mental illness, deep-seated emotional trauma, and coaches are going to, though there may be some overlap, coaches are going to be far less therapeutic and much more forward-thinking.
Yeah, I don't know about, therapeutic is a matter of degrees and what, you have, but mostly it's a complementary relationship. And I think that's really important. I often get referrals from therapists because they don't do statements of net worth and hire attorneys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, in some of the marital mediation work that I've done, I've had clients who one partner is diagnosed as depressed, or they're diagnosed as having an addictions issue. And in my experience, if they're not being treated for that outside of the couples work, then the couples work can't move forward. And it is not my role to help them with that. My role is to help them with what they came to me for. And it sounds very, very similar, actually, except that instead of a couple, you're working with an individual.
Exactly. Exactly.
Got it. I got it. And I'm actually curious about your MBA. I know that in reading about you, and you've been interviewed pretty extensively, this comes into play. Tell our audience more about how your business background helps you in this work.
I look at my work with my clients as helping them separate the emotions of divorce from the business of divorce, because unfortunately, you know, if you break down divorce to its real elements, it's you're breaking a contract, and there are a lot of things that have to get done. And so I look at it, you know, not impersonally, but from a business point of view. This is what we need to do. This is what your financial picture is. This is how much money's coming in. This is how much money's going out. These are the changes you're going to have to make. So I have a very business entrepreneurial focus, which is, you know, kind of where I guess the MBA plays in my thinking, and the marketing aspects of it as well.
Okay, so it's about separating. I like the way you said you're breaking a contract, or maybe it's renegotiating a contract, because I mean, if you have children, that contract's definitely being renegotiated.
Yes.
And actually, I've heard professionals in the psychology field say that even if you don't have children, that relationship in some way continues. Even if you don't talk to each other very often over years, the fact that you were married and the fact that you had that agreement is always with you. So I really get the idea of renegotiating a contract. And so you separate the business side from the emotional side. And how does that help the people getting divorced?
Well, I think when you're, you know, overwhelmed by emotion, your brain, you know, technically your brain is not functioning at full capacity, you know, full ability, and you're not seeing things clearly. And you'll often make rash decisions because you want to get it over with, or you'll make irrational decisions because you're just so angry or upset or whatever that is. So that's one very big piece of what I do, trying to help my clients see, like, how much of this is an emotional decision? I absolutely have to keep the house. It's the only thing I want, versus, let's be realistic, keeping the house is a really expensive proposition. Does it really make sense? I had another thought and I just I just lost it, but it was
no, I've heard so many attorneys say they don't understand why their clients are willing to spend $5,000 on a $300 chair. You know, and it's all because of that, what you were just talking about. Emotionally, that chair represents something. And then when they get to the other end of the divorce, they're like, what am I doing with this chair? Like, the chair represented it. It wasn't it. And so I could see how separating the emotional from the material, or from business from the emotional, could make a huge difference, and probably make your divorce a lot less expensive.
Right. And that was the other piece that I was going to say. I try to run interference, certainly in the high conflict situations, and even in mediation. I tell my clients, if you are having an emotional outburst that you just need your attorney to know, send it to me, call me, get it out with me, because your attorney, and in, you know, New York, attorneys are somewhere between 500 and up an hour. You're paying in 6 to 10 minute increments. And that is one really expensive Kleenex box, is what I tell my clients. So trying to keep the cost down is a really big part of it. I just want to go back for a minute to the thought about the contract of divorce versus the business and the ongoing relationship that you mentioned, because you sparked a thought. One of the things that the head of my divorce coaching program said to us early on was that you don't really get over a divorce, you just integrate it into your life. And I think that's very much what you were saying, because it's true. You'll always have been divorced whether or not you have children, and it informs how you move forward with the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was talking to you earlier about my Divorce Proof Your Kids program that I just completed the beta group of. And a big part of the process, what we do first is we help the parents. Let me backtrack. So that, because I know you know what the program is, but the people who are listening may not. We help people to let go of the emotional hooks that their divorce may have in them, so they can really focus on building resilience in their own life and in their children's life. And resilience is that quality that helps us to bounce back, that helps us to recover, that when we fall down 7 times, we get up 8. And so a big piece of that, of the front end of the program, is all about mourning the loss of the relationship, which, because the divorce, when people get to divorce, they like to say things like, oh, what a terrible mistake I made. How did I marry that schmuck, that whatever, I can't believe they fooled me. But the truth is that they probably weren't fooled. The truth is that in the beginning, something really good was happening. And then over time, for whatever reason, the relationship shifted and became more toxic. And so part of the process in the workshop is celebrating and mourning the loss of what was good, and acknowledging that there was something good there, that something good came from it, that it wasn't that each individual were total idiots and sucked each other into a highly toxic, punitive relationship, but it was that it started out on good footing and something else happened along the way. And that mourning process is part of what helps them to move forward in their life. And it's also so beneficial for the children, because the children aren't hearing the parents say, what a mistake that was, which happens to be the relationship that they were born out of. Like, how could you as a child grow up in that environment and feel good about yourself?
Absolutely. And that work is so important, because we know, and research shows that children suffer more from the process of divorce, from how you get divorced and how you interact with your spouse and them during and after the divorce, than they do from the actual divorce. And so like a program like that is absolutely critical to healthy children post-divorce.
Yeah, most people don't know that children are at higher risk in the first 2 years after the divorce is over than while the divorce is going on.
Yeah.
And it has to do exactly with what you're talking about. Do they resolve those emotional issues, or are they still hung up on that piece of stickly furniture, or absolutely having that house, or whatever it is that represents security, happiness, and joy for them?
Yeah, and having the plans in place. And I think one of the things that I learned, my children were, my younger one was 18. She was a senior in high school. My older one was in college. And because the youngest was 18, we didn't have to put any parenting plans in place.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a huge mistake, because we were winging it in terms of holidays, weekends, who came where, when, where does my son stay when he comes home from college, all these things. And I think the more you can have it, and even though we weren't fighting, the kids were very at sea and lost in where they needed to be. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think any planning, taking out the emotion, being ready for the post-divorce life is very important.
For people who, I got like, we're running out of time, and I'm hooked by this thing of having adult children. I know that actually there's a misconception that adult children are at lower risk when parents are getting divorced, and the reality is that kids in their 18s, in their 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, or even 23, 24, 25, they're less flexible in some ways than younger children. And I'm curious, how, you are educated and intelligent. How have you managed to avoid some of the pitfalls of having older children when you get divorced? And what are steps that you would suggest for people who are in that position?
Well, the first thing, I think the tendency is, because they're older, to kind of think you can tell them anything and bounce
Mm-hmm.
things off of them.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in my case, we didn't really fight that much. So for my kids, they had no idea it was coming, and the bottom kind of fell out. And I think that often happens, especially when the empty nesters, when the kids are gone. So I think certainly if they're, don't use your kids as your friends during your divorce. They're still kids, even if they're older. I think planning for things that I didn't think of, I think, in terms of scheduling, ask the kids, perhaps it's a family conversation about, okay, like, let's try to figure this out. What's best for all of us for Thanksgiving and Christmas and vacations, and what do we, if there's a new partner, my ex just got engaged, so there's a lot of drama around that, and how that will affect, the family in the future. So just having these conversations, but as their parents, not as their friend, and not putting them in the middle. same roles as little ones, but they really do, it hurts them as well.
Yeah, so I hear you saying loud and clear, don't put them in the middle, don't make them confidants, and make sure that there's a lot of communication around what's going on.
Exactly,
Great
exactly.
advice. One last question. We're a little over, but I have to know. So what is the legacy that you want to leave behind as a divorce professional? Or as a human being? Excuse me, but as a human being, let's go all out.
Well, I think, many of us have had, at least certainly in my case, that was, a lonely place to be in an unhappy relationship. And divorce is an extremely lonely experience. And no matter how many people, all your friends and all your family who want to help you, at the end of the day, it's your own experience. And I really pride myself on being there for you and being that person so that you don't have to be alone in this experience and you don't have to be alone in life. And in fact, I have just one little push for if you're in the New York City area, I have a women's group that meets once a month. Tomorrow actually is our March meeting. I don't know when this will air, but I am trying to grow a social group called Women, Wine, and Wisdom. So,
and how can people find that group?
If you go on my website, thedivorcierge.com, and I'm assuming you'll put the spelling in your show notes so that people can get
Absolutely.
that right. Under events, you will see the upcoming events that I have that are live. And then I'll be launching a podcast as well called Dear Divorcierge to answer your divorce questions coming up in the spring.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That sounds awesome because I think people really need that. I think people need a place where they can ask these questions and get straight answers. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You have been amazing, and I'm sure you will continue to be amazing. And I look forward to learning more about you and your professional life as we get to know each other better.
Thank you so much, Rich. Thanks for having me.